Gotta get the selfie.
Got this. I'll get the selfie too.
This is Mateo. This is my co-host.
Okay.
Not really. He's my roommate. I do have a co-host. He's just not
Functioning.
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 Examples of functioning. Navigational sensors aren't functioning. Glad to see you still fully functioning.
Okay.
His name's Tom, and he lives in Albuquerque.
Okay.
And he is on a spiritual quest right now.
Okay.
Doing his own little thing. He's very much into that.
Okay.
A lot of the podcasts we talk about him, trying to join a monastery, not join a monastery.
Okay.
And that's very deeply involved with his own sobriety.
Okay.
Which is cool. And then I bring in kind of another aspect of it. I bring in therapy. I've done a shit ton of therapy, as one should.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also do a lot of jujitsu and yoga. So I
great.
bring in a lot of somatic kind of learnings and things like that.
I love that because things like that have been really helpful for me as well.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start out there.
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, I think for me, I like a lot of people that are in recovery or struggle with sobriety, might have trauma from their childhood, which I definitely experienced, which resulted in a very chaotic and dysregulated nervous system.
Yeah.
Which also, I was also very emotionally dysregulated. So, at the beginning of my sobriety journey, I actually went through a year-long online holistic health and wellness program that just completely changed my life, and incorporating things like meditation and yoga and just ways to regulate my nervous system. I went through a functional medicine program. I did acupuncture. I saw a biodynamic craniosacral therapist. So
Whoa.
a lot of things like that really, really benefited me.
Biodynamic sacral cranial.
Biodynamic craniosacral
Cranial.
therapy. I know, it's crazy.
Biodynamic cranial
sacral therapy.
therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that just cupping and rolling on the
No,
floor?
it's very hard to explain. I can't even really explain it, but it's just a way to really, so there's the practitioner, and basically you're lying on a massage table and they get you into a sense of relaxation. You start off with meditation and things like that, and then basically it's light touching on you, and they just are able to somehow read your body. I know it sounds so woo-woo and crazy.
No, this is a woo-woo podcast. That's okay.
But I experienced my entire life really bad this cramping in my legs when I slept, and I always struggled with sleeping, and it was this agitated thing in my leg, and I just kind of thought, so when I was younger, when I was 7 years old, my father committed suicide, and I struggled with sleeping after that because I think it was waking up and my whole life changed, and it was something so dramatic. So I think that, since that young age, I really struggled, my body couldn't feel safe and comfortable sleeping. It was almost is something dramatic and crazy going to happen in the morning?
Yeah.
So it was almost my body wouldn't allow myself to sleep. And I went to doctors, and pretty much everyone said I was fine, or I was just making it up, or, being dramatic. But then I heard things about, this type of therapy is really working. And I went to 3 sessions, and I've never experienced that with my legs again. So it might be, sound crazy, but I was I need things that work for me, because things, my body is just responding to trauma in a way that, I wanted to empower myself to find different means to try to help myself and help my body regulate.
So it's almost I've never done it before, but it's somatic massage or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Similar.
Yeah, I had never even heard of that until about 3 years ago. I was really leaning into yoga from my own recovery. And
Mhm.
also I was in this terrible relationship. So I was just like trying to get out of the house.
Mhm.
And there was nowhere to go. So I just worked out all the time, and I
Mhm.
had picked up jujitsu, and I was doing that in the mornings, and then I had work in the day, and then I needed something to do at night. And so I started going to yoga. And as I was doing yoga, I was feeling these like very visceral memories, like
Mhm.
these really intense, almost lucid memories, as if I was like being transported. It's like that movie, The Butterfly Effect. Have you ever seen that
Mhm.
with Ashton
Absolutely.
Kutcher?
Mhm.
And it was like suddenly I was like, a kid in my mom's garage. Sometimes they were really benign. I'd be like, just in at the playground in elementary school, and I'd feel like the Texas wind blow, and then I would suddenly be right back there in the yoga studio. But
Mhm.
sometimes they'd be really wild and things that I hadn't thought about or never realized or never remembered. And it started getting to points where I felt like, like high school was in my left leg and like college was in my right leg, and
Mhm.
I could start pinpointing it. And then once I got through all of that, it just turned into like pure visceral memories. So just like emotions.
Mhm.
So I remember I was trying to do a forward fold, and I grew up a runner. My mom was a marathon runner. So my hamstrings are tight, and not like tight, but like very tight.
Mhm.
And, and I remember I was doing a forward fold, and my yoga teacher, who was on the podcast before, Asia, she just came over and just kind of like tapped me a little bit. Like I couldn't do anything. I was
Mhm.
completely I couldn't even sit up straight. I was so just tight in my hamstrings. And she just kind of put her hand a little bit on my upper back and gave me a little bit of weight there. And then suddenly I had this huge rush of just like my blood was pumping, emotions were coming. I was feeling all of like a myriad of emotions, from like happy to sadness, all of
Mhm.
these things. And I was experiencing all of this while everyone else was just doing yoga. And I was like, wow, this is like why people do yoga. This is
Mhm.
like an intense experience.
Mhm.
And then afterwards, I just had to like think about it. And I remember I was leaving, and I was like, hey, when you did that, that was crazy. And then she was like, yeah, it seems like you really had a moment there. And then I brought it up to my therapist, and she told me about somatic therapy. She's like, you had a somatic experience.
Mhm.
And then I started getting more and more into that, and just exploring more and more into that. And now I think Tom's partner is a somatic masseuse.
Okay, wow.
So don't be afraid of being woo woo on this
Yeah,
podcast.
and actually when you say that about that experience and having that emotional reaction every time, so when I went to the biodynamic therapist, he said that I might experience dreams, like weird dreams or something like that. And I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't really think too much about it, but I have, I had a lot of anger pent up from my childhood.
Yeah.
And after each session, I had nightmares that were basically like me, like screaming and yelling and being like, like anger towards my parents. And I could just like feel it in my body, that like in my dream, that like anger just like flooding out of me. And so it was crazy. After all three of those experiences, I had like nightmares of like releasing anger. And I think it was just like trapped in my body. And like when they do what they do, it like shifts energy and can
Yeah.
help like bring this trapped emotion that's, trapped in your body, can kind of bring it up to the surface.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, I have these situations where whenever I start to feel very safe, especially with people, my body is, or my mind will suddenly start bringing me to like worse places, or I'll have to like wrestle with a lot of stuff from my own past, because like you, I also, and like most people in recovery, had a really tough childhood, and adulthood, and nowhood, and it's just a lot of it was, once you start feeling safe, your brain is like, oh, you're safe now. Now you got to process all that shit you just went through,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's when it gets a little rough. That's
Mm-hmm.
when you have to do the work, and so. And especially in your dreams, I've been having a lot of dreams even lately, just I think because of Thanksgiving and like
Mm-hmm.
the winter coming, and
Sure.
I'm not getting enough D vitamins and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I also think it's because I have built my life in a way that I actually kind of starting to feel safe and protected. And like, I got a little bit of a cushion financially. I have good friends. I put in all this work. And so now my brain is just like, hey, now let's process all that shit that you've been through. And it's like, I already did that. Can we can I just like enjoy this a little bit?
That's what I think it's so frustrating sometimes about like being in recovery or like the healing journey. It's like, can I just relax for a little bit?
Can I just get a break?
Yeah. It's like, I love the work that I've done. I love working on myself, the self-discovery, all of that. But then it's like, I just want to like chill for a little bit. I feel like it's just constant work sometimes that can be exhausting.
Yeah, it's every day. Every day you got to put something in, and it's exhausting and a little annoying.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes social media can glamorize it a little bit. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to put the work in today.
Yeah, I just want to like sit and watch TV.
Exactly.
And do nothing. But then you're like, when you do that, you're like, God, I did nothing today. I'm supposed to do stuff.
I think it's a balance because I think, before, I've always struggled with depression, and not even like I'm sad. It's more of this like freeze response in my body of like, I am so exhausted. I just feel nothing but fatigue. I feel unmotivated. The things that have brought me joy just are not bringing me joy. I feel like trapped in my own mind, my own body. And I used to, if I stayed in bed all day or whatever, then I would get into the like, you're such a fucking loser, like, and get into that headspace and just like really shame myself or with the negative self-talk loop. But then that just continued to make me feel worse. And then my behaviors and things that I would do would just basically go off of that like negative mindset and the negative way that I was speaking to myself. So now if I'm tired or whatever, I think last weekend, I think I slept until like, I didn't get out of bed until 2:00. And I was like,
nice.
I have been stressed. I have been overstimulated. I really needed this. And then the next, like I got up and then I was really productive. I did things around my house. And went about the rest of my day, but I was able to be productive and I was able to do things because I was like, I allowed myself to rest, and now I'm going to do this instead of just that negative self-talk and that negative feedback loop that, would used to keep me low. And then the next day I got up early and I was productive again. And it was like, okay, I just needed to sleep in all day, and that's fine.
Active rest, self-compassion, which is
exactly
the theme you chose today, right?
Yes, it is. And I think again that was the biggest shift for me, was incorporating self-acceptance and self-compassion, because I, again, from my childhood and my conditioning from parts of my childhood, I was the problem and things like that, just like negative self-belief that I had, and just the constant, like, it was just like constant for years, just like, you're a loser, like you're a piece of shit, like just like nonstop, based on some things from my childhood. And then I think when I started my healing journey, I was like, wait a minute, like, none of this is your fault. You don't need to stay in this victim mentality that you have. You absolutely need to take accountability and change a lot of aspects of your life. However, by talking to myself in a kind way, by connecting with myself in a kind way, really helped me move forward. And it was like, I started empowering myself, like, you deserve to heal. You deserve to have positive things happen in your life. And just shifting that mindset made a huge difference for me. Because if I was staying in that loop, then my behavioral patterns stayed the same.
Yeah, because you keep pushing until you burn out, and then you burn out, and then you're resting, and while you're resting, you're calling yourself an asshole for resting. Yeah. I mean, I got upset with myself the other day because I saw this like illustrated timeline of Walt Disney's life. And I was like, oh my God, he was 31 when he founded Mickey Mouse. I was like, what am I doing with my life? I'm 38. What am I doing? And it's just like, what a ridiculous thing. It took me a full 5 hours to just be like, what a ridiculous thing to compare myself to. Walt Disney? Really? And I was like mad that I hasn't been like, because I doodled when I was a kid, and I was like, why didn't I keep up doodling? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I like follow that path? And then yeah, I just had to take a moment and get. I actually really just needed some sleep. Yesterday, that's all I did. I just like slept all my Thanksgiving away, and counted my blessings and all that, and felt very thankful for where I'm at. But I'll never reach Walt Disney's life.
And that's
He also died
okay.
at 65 or something like that. So I think I'll live longer than him. So
Yes.
maybe I'll reach a Walt Disney level of fame if I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another thing too, just comparing, just the comparison trap that I think we all get stuck in sometimes. And it's like everybody has a different set of circumstances. And I feel like in my past, I have really gotten caught up in that. And you know,
The Walt
my
Disney
peers, sure, yes, the comparison trap. Because I'm about to be 35 myself, and I look at other people my age or younger than me, and I'm like, why am I not at that level, or you know, things like that. And it's like, well, I had a different set of circumstances than they did, and instead of like, again, it's just like a mindset shift of, instead of why can't I be like them, something more along the lines of what about them inspires me, or what about them can I take from that and will empower me and make me want to improve or grow or something like that.
Yeah, I usually try to figure out what their thought pattern is that got them there. Because I've had to learn from watching other people from afar kind of thing. So I usually will kind of sneak like a little voyeur and be like, how do they get here faster than me? Like what am I doing wrong? Or what's the thought pattern that I didn't learn while I was dealing with my shit that maybe they learned? And like, I just try to put myself in that mentality to get me there, Maybe you should introduce yourself.
Maybe I should. So my name is Hannah. I am May 1st, 2019 is my sobriety date.
Oh shit! Congrats.
So thank you. So
we've never done sobriety dates on the podcast.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I'm proud of it, so I always like bringing it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2024 in May will be 5 years of sobriety for me. And I am also the founder of Chicago Sober Society, which is a sober social club.
Nice. Yeah, that's why I reached out to you. I think we have like little sound cues. No, not that one. No. This one. This is the one I'm looking for.
Yes.
The others are not appropriate. That's why I reached out to you. I reached out to you because I have seen that popping up on my feed, and I was super interested in it. I haven't been able to catch anything yet. I really want to. I also just joined the Facebook group.
Okay, great.
But I see it blowing up, and I know I just hit 5 years. My date is 11/13/2018.
Awesome.
But that was like I've been sober multiple times before that, and then lots of relapses and stuff. And one of the biggest reasons I relapse is the only thing to do, especially in your 20s, that doesn't involve drinking is like working out, and like walking in the park, or like going to, I guess, a water park. But even then, like, it's hard to find people who want to do that. It's hard to like hang out with people. And that was the biggest thing that I had. And so when I think I didn't start seeing mocktails until like 2019 maybe or something like that. So whenever more of those kind of like the NA, I guess we could call it a movement, started pushing forward, I was like, oh great, this is something that can like keep people sober. It can help people get sober. Because my first year of sobriety, I just stayed inside because every time I relapsed was out of pure boredom. And now it seems like I can go, like Hop Leaf has a whole menu of just NA bar or NA booze and mocktails and stuff like that. And almost every place I go to has something other than O'Doul's, which I don't want to drink O'Doul's because that's like, to me, that screams like grandpa alcoholic.
Yes, 100%.
And they're disgusting. And it's just like, it's like when you have like a fancy looking IPA that could be any sort of IPA,
Mm-hmm.
then no one's going to be like, oh shit, you're not, you know, because I used to go out when I first got sober. I would go out and people, you would order like a Coke, and then everyone would have like a nice fancy like martini glass or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and then you'd be carrying this like giant
Yeah.
red cup
Yeah.
that's like a gallon
Mm-hmm.
of Coke, and just trying to look normal with it, and you
Mm-hmm.
literally have this big thing that's just screaming like,
100%.
I'm an alcoholic, I'm
Mm-hmm.
in recovery.
Yeah.
And then the people would ask about it. I've noticed that some people would get mad at me
Mm-hmm.
because of my own sobriety, which really what they're mad is they have to
Projecting.
rethink their own
Yes.
relationship with
Mhm.
alcohol.
Yeah.
And now I don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
It makes it more acceptable. And then now I'm having people like, oh yeah, I kind of like those. You know, sometimes I'll have like a beer and then one of those to like balance me out. And I'm like, that's great. That's an amazing thing. And now I'm starting to see Chicago Sober Society where there's actually events that's outside of going to a meeting and AA and stuff like that and getting really sad. It's like actually people hanging out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the non-alcoholic beverage movement has really been a game changer, I think, for me, and I think a lot of people, because it's changing the narrative.
Yeah.
Which, again, I think that when people think of people in recovery or being sober, it's always just kind of the same negative thought process. Whereas, now, and I think Chicago especially is just blowing up with the non-alcoholic beverages. And you can still go out, because I still want to go out. I want to go out to restaurants. I want to get dressed up. I want to go out and experience the city.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my boyfriend is actually a sommelier. So like wine is his job. But we go out.
It's the first time I've ever heard that word said out loud. I've never knew sommelier. I don't know. I have no idea.
But so we can go out. He's like the one person that I've ever met that like knows how to handle himself like properly, and he can moderate, and I'm like, how do you do that?
So
weird. But he'll have a glass of wine at dinner, and then I still have like a mocktail or whatever they have, and it just feels great. Because before we would go out, I would not be able to control myself. I would get hammered, and then I would come home and emotionally just like project at him, and then we'd get into a huge fight, and then the next morning I would feel shame, and it was like this whole spiral. So now we can go out, I can have my drink, he can have his drink, we go home, we don't fight, and it's great. So that's been really, a game changer. But then also, when I created Chicago Sober Society, that's what I was looking for. I was like, I know that I'm not the only one that's looking for fun things to do in the city that don't involve drinking.
Yeah.
So I started doing these meetups once a month, and I try to switch it up and do something fun. Sometimes we'll do like yoga class or a sound bath, or there's so many non-alcoholic brands or groups that are doing pop-ups now, so we can all go to these non-alcoholic bars together and just kind of get to know each other and celebrate our sobriety together and not feel ashamed about it.
And also bring back, because when I got sober I lost my community. Probably for the better, but I got lonely, and now you're bringing that back. Like there is that aspect of wanting to just hang,
Absolutely.
And it's hard to do that when you're literally surrounded by your greatest enemy.
Yeah.
And that's what anyone ever wants to do. It's just like, even when like at work events, everything, you get a new job and your boss is like, let's have a beer together. It's like a whole culture thing, and you're like, oh great, I have to deal with my biggest enemy just to like hang out with people. And now it's not even an issue. I went to the opera recently, and they had a specialty mocktail for that opera, and I was like, this is great. We're in a whole, and it wasn't just all the mixers, which is how it used to be. It used to they would just put all the mixers into one cup, and it would just be this sugary thing. It was this like well balanced, like well crafted thing. It was named after one of the characters at the lyric opera.
So special.
Yeah, and I was just like sitting there, and then my girlfriend was there, and she had like her own little cocktail there, and we were just vibing and just spending time at the opera. And it wasn't me having to be like, boy, I wish I could have a drink right now, or like, get a little buzzed or something, you know what I mean? I felt perfectly normal. And it was just because someone took the effort to like make that extra step, you know, and order that extra thing, you know?
Absolutely. And I think that also, again, with shifting the narrative, it destigmatizes being sober. It's like, here's an option for you. You absolutely belong in this situation. And, you know, here, I feel like when seeing things on a menu like that, people that might be in the position where they're kind of sober curious, or they're like, what could my life be like? And they see like, oh, I can go here and have this beverage and it's not a big deal. Like when I go out and I'm drinking, you know, my non-alcoholic beverage, I'm like, nobody can tell. Nobody knows that I'm sober.
Because you don't have a big red cup of Coca-Cola in front of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How do you feel about sober curious, the term? When I first saw it, I hated it. Yeah, I can say it's
I think it's hard because I think that there's so many different shades of sobriety. I think that there's people that have a physical dependency and physical addiction. And I think that there's people that, like for me personally, I was on that path and I steered before I got there.
Okay. Yeah.
I was definitely I was blacking out almost every night. I was putting myself in really dangerous positions. Again, I was just constantly causing fights. I was doing coke at work. Just a lot of things, having horrible anxiety, but I didn't feel like I was at a place where I felt physically dependent, but I knew I was going there. And I knew that all of these other terrible things were going on in my life because of drinking. And once I removed the alcohol component and started working on my healing, it definitely made a huge shift for me. So I think that for some people, I completely understand how it can be offensive even. But I think for some people, it's just like, is alcohol serving me anymore?
Yeah.
You know, like my cousin, actually, she just celebrated her 1 year of sobriety, and I don't think she necessarily had a problem with alcohol. She just wanted to take her physical health more seriously, and she wanted to be more present for her kids.
Yeah.
And that has been such a positive, obviously, thing and then her husband joined her. He was like, if you're going to be sober, I'm going to stop drinking too. So both of them stopped drinking, and they like work out and go to yoga classes together, and they're just such involved, in a good way, parents with their kids. And it was just, you know,
they didn't like have to hit a rock bottom.
No.
And it's not like in society's kind of changing, or culture rather is changing in a way where when you say like, oh, I'm not drinking, they're not like, what's going on? You know, what happened? You know, something like that. It's just like, oh, cool. It's like, there's a lot of different reasons. I just feel like when I first saw it, it was in, I don't know, some trendy article. And I was like, ugh, just say like,
and like the context obviously matters.
Yeah. And it's just like, it feels like there's like, you know, there's like bi-curious. It brings me into that area, and I'm just like, I don't know if we should be, it's like, it's just weird. But yeah, the spectrum of it all is important. And that's why we started this podcast, is because we were feeling that the narrative of an alcoholic, especially one that I've always encountered, is drunk dad beating his kids, or like dude passed out on the sidewalk. And that's why it's called functioning, because I didn't do any of that. I was perfectly okay. I was also doing lines of coke at work. I was drunk at work. I was drunk all the time. But I also was working constantly, and I had this like unfettered energy that could get me and push me to do anything.
Same. And I was excelling at work too.
I was doing great. Except for when I needed like to really double down, or I needed to be present. That was hard. Or if I needed to pull away from the alcohol, or like work was great, my life was not, you know, and the next mornings was like just all crappy and shitty. And it felt like, well, there were a lot of years there was like, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm just a guy who like drinks a lot, or I'm just like a party guy or whatever, because I was doing comedy. I was doing all of these things where alcohol, I work in advertising. Alcohol is very much present culturally. It's like, oh, I'm just like, that's who I am. I was raised that way. And then I eventually was like, oh, I can't go a day without drinking. I remember I was like, there are times when I would have to drink like a bunch of like a fifth of gin, not a fifth, like a quart of gin before I even like went to the party. Like my pregame was most people's like, and I was like, okay, maybe I am physically dependent. Maybe I am there. And then I took that leap, and then I started seeing more people like the leap is not as big because that was the hardest thing is because at the time it felt like when I quit, I would have to like explain it to people. I'd have to come up with some sort of, dog and pony show to let them know what's going on with me, or like I would have to like make them feel better about my sobriety. And then now we have like Run Wild IPAs and like well-being brewing, which is like completely non-A or NA kind of stuff. And it's incredible. It's incredible to have these in all these spaces, have all these people offering these spaces and offering these drinks where it's not about getting fucking shithouse hammered. It's just about like enjoying a beer or a cocktail or, I even had like over Thanksgiving, there's like non-alcoholic champagne, which is crazy, which beforehand it was just sparkling apple cider, which is also what I drank when I was 10.
Yep.
I still prefer sparkling apple cider. But it's just like now there's all of these options. Like, was it Seed Lip was the first one I saw. It was like kind of just like a gin kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just changed everything for me.
Absolutely.
So what other than like pushing you to like get people together, what else kind of like what was like the catalyst? What like were you when you were sober, or was it before you were sober? Or?
To start Chicago Sober Society? It was once I was already sober. I was already sober for maybe 6 months. And again, I started my sobriety journey. I really got into working out again, and I would go to different like workout classes, and that was great. I enjoyed that for myself, but I was looking for community. And I went through this holistic health program. So I didn't go through a traditional 12-step program. I had tried that before, and I know it works great for a lot of people, but for me, I just felt like I didn't feel connected to it.
Yeah, I didn't either.
So I was like, I want to find something that's very community driven, but that's also like really fun and feels, something that I like about Chicago Sober Society and some of these other sober groups is that our sobriety is the common thread that brings us together, but we're not always talking about our sobriety when we get together.
Yeah.
That might naturally come up, or we might ask each other advice, or we might like talk about things, but there's so many other parts of us. Like we might talk about our jobs or our family or music or things, a concert we want to go to, or there's just so many other aspects of our lives that are like beyond our sobriety. So I feel like it's, again, our sobriety brings us together, but there's ways of connecting with other people that you might not have like known or met, and connect on other things as well. And then it's like, okay, we're just together drinking our mocktails and connecting and having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, I also didn't go through a 12-step program. I had a really terrible experience at AA my first time I got sober, so I stayed away from that. But also, it's kind of a bummer, especially when you first start.
I never want to say anything negative because I know a lot of people, like it can help people and it can,
Yeah, I've seen it help a lot of people.
But that's exactly how I felt. I'm like, I want to celebrate my sobriety. I want to like celebrate and not feel bummy. Yeah, I don't want to feel like, ugh, I'm missing out on something. It was, again, I wanted to like change the narrative of like, this is what like sobriety, because everyone's like, oh, sobriety is so boring. I'm like, no, it can actually be really cool and fun. Let me show you how we can do that.
Yeah. And it's not just going bowling or roller skating or anything like that, even though those are fun as hell. I've been trying to get a ton of people to go to medieval times.
Oh, fun.
It's a hard sell. I don't know why. Nobody wants to go.
I think I would go. I mean, I think it's just it's a long experience.
Is it? I haven't gone since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it felt amazing. I just want to get like a group of us to eat with our hands
Mhm.
and like cheer for the Green Knight and just like go really crazy because I don't really like sports.
Okay, yeah.
But like my favorite sports movie is the I can't with the one with Heath Ledger. I can't
A
think of it.
Knight's Tale.
A Knight's Tale.
I remember. Okay, so funny and random. That was the first movie that I saw in the theaters with my friends, like without my parents.
Ooh.
So I just always remember.
So it's
that.
like in there. Yeah, it follows the same story as all
Mhm.
sports movies where he's like, you know, he comes from a poor family
Mhm.
and he rises to the top using his
Mhm.
athleticism, but it's all about jousting. And the only
Mhm.
place I can really get into that is medieval times.
Yeah.
And I can't get anyone in on it.
It's in the suburbs too, right?
Yeah, it's kind
That
of a
might
drive.
be-
I also don't have a car, so
Yeah.
I have to find a
I
friend
know.
with a car.
I think that's sometimes
It's also
part
tickets
of,
are like $50 each.
Yeah, I think doing stuff in the suburbs when you live in the city is a little bit challenging. I actually just was it last weekend?
Is there an opportunity to do like sober jousting or anything? Could we
I
get
don't know. Maybe we should look into that.
Yeah.
But we went to Go Brewing in Naperville. I think it was last weekend or the weekend before, which is Chicagoland's first non-alcoholic brewery.
Whoa,
So it was
I didn't know
super
that.
cool. And it was like, again, like I like the atmosphere of a bar,
Mhm.
like the vibe. But again, it was all non-alcoholic beers. Like it had like the cool couches and like board games. And it was a bar, but no booze. But that was in the suburbs in Naperville. So we didn't get as large of a turnout as we normally do. And I think it's just the challenge of not a lot of people have access to a car. I don't. You said you don't. So
Yeah, I wouldn't
think
have
that's
been
a
able to
little
go.
bit-
I mean, and
yeah.
then like an Uber there is like $75
Yeah.
or something.
mhm.
Yeah, I didn't know they had that.
Yeah, definitely check it out. So Go Brewing. They also they're just like blowing up now, and now they're I'm seeing some of their beers on menus in the city. I'm seeing them like I work downtown, and there's a Southport or South Loop Market like grocery little thing there, and they have a ton of non-alcoholic beers, and they sell the Go Brewing
What?
in there,
I
which
didn't
is
know that at
really
all.
cool to see. Yeah.
I know about like there's like a bottle shop, Benediction, I think it's called.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, I haven't been there yet, but it seems neat.
Highly recommend checking it out.
Really?
They have a ton of cool stuff. Christina does really great work there. So it's they have a ton of non-alcoholic bottles and, different options to choose from, but then she also has a little community space in there too. So hosts a lot of events
Okay.
and workshops in there, which is really cool. So that's a cool way to kind of, follow along on their social media and see what kind of events they're hosting. And, you can show up to an event and, maybe meet people that way. Also, In Good Spirits is a newer bottle shop that opened recently in Westtown. I had a meetup there last month, and they had specialty drinks for us. And again, it was just everyone just come and get together and hang out.
See, that's I got like so used to like not leaving,
Mm-hmm.
and so and especially a lot of those things are not off the red line
Mm-hmm.
or the brown line, so it's a
Yeah.
little hard for me to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just I'm still kind of like anytime there's an event like that, there's still kind of that like threat,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh man, am I going to be in a space where I'm going to have to deal with with my alcoholism? Am I going to be tempted to drink? Especially when you say West Loop, it's just like I see a lot of Patagonia jackets,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of like fancy little bars and like
West
things
Town, though.
West Town.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
a little
yeah.
different.
Okay, good point.
But,
Good
mhm.
point. It's
The
good to
vibe
be,
is a
it's
little
good to be
different.
pedantic here.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I've never really checked all that stuff out. So the movement is really kicking in, especially here in Chicago.
Yeah,
I had no
absolutely.
idea.
Absolutely.
You have like the finger on the pulse here.
I try to, but that's the thing, because I want people to know about all these options. My goal is really to change the narrative. Like, there are so many options. There are so many things you can do. These are ways that you can meet people. These are, that's really what I'm about. And there's a lot of different groups. like the Chicago AF community. They're huge. I think I do more like small, like meetups, like, hey, this is going on in Chicago, let's do this. Like next month we're meeting up at the Maggie Daly ice skating rink, and then afterwards we're gonna go walk down to the Nutella Cafe and have some like sweet treats and just like fun stuff like that. It's next month. I think on Friday the 15th I posted about it.
Okay.
But just like fun things like this is already going on in the city. Like let's go together.
Yeah.
Like, and instead of drinking, let's go ice skating and go to the Nutella Cafe, you know? But the Chicago AF community does larger scale events. Like over the summer, they did their second annual No Booze Cruise and had like different non-alcoholic brands, and it's just like super fun.
Where did they cruise to?
Around the river.
Okay.
So that was really fun, but there's just like, and then In Good Spirits and Absence of Proof Chicago, they do pop-ups every month, and Solar Intentions is a pop-up that's like astrology and non-alcoholic, like,
oh, I love that.
Combined. Yeah, so there's all these different options, and what I love also is that with these groups it's like collaboration over competition.
Mm-hmm.
We all have the same goal of like creating like sober, safe, fun spaces. So I just love promoting like the work that they're doing, and just, you know, showcasing all the options, especially in Chicago. Like people from even like that follow me from New York and LA, they're like, Chicago really, like the sober scene looks so cool there. Like I wish we had as much going on here.
Yeah, I had no idea. I know I heard there's like a bar that serves no alcohol in New York, and I'd see that like in the New York Times,
Mm-hmm.
but I had no idea that all of it, like I think I follow like 2 or 3 of the groups that you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all up in those hashtags.
Mm-hmm.
I had no clue. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, you know, I know that Chicago was like a drinking city.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I wonder if that's probably what's happening, is there's
Mm-hmm.
like everyone's like, well, I'm sober now, and
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic definitely like woke a lot of people up for sure.
Absolutely.
And I wonder if that's what happened. They're like, well, we can't just keep living like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, well, Chicago is an amazing place. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, it's affordable and there's a shit ton of shit to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so people just started picking up. Did you do event coordinating before, or like?
I did.
Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
there's that.
Yeah.
So you already had that
Mm-hmm.
in your back
Yeah,
pocket.
I worked in hospitality for a while, and I did events. So I think it's just like, you know, those like crossing paths. It's crazy because, you know, in the hospitality industry, there's a lot of drinking culture,
Yeah.
and it's very normalized.
Yeah,
So
I worked in the restaurant business for a long time.
Mhm. So obviously, you know, so now, you know, taking what I learned with doing events and putting that positive spin on it is nice.
That's awesome. So what did you do? I mean, so what kind of events did you throw before? Was it just regular?
Well, I did through the restaurant that I was a GM of a restaurant, and then we also had an event space. So I did a lot of, you know, like corporate events, but also like a lot of baby showers, bridal showers, some weddings. And then we did some offsite catering, like at a lot of like the pop-ups around the city, like what's the big one at Grant Park every year? Like Chicago Gourmet, like those big foodie pop-ups around the city. So I did a lot of that stuff
So
too.
you were already just like ready for it. You already knew the distributors. You already knew the venue spaces, and you just like went right at it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's incredible. I definitely did not have that motivation when I first got sober.
I think, again, I was just like, I want to, again, just change the narrative and destigmatize things. Because I think that that's what holds so many people back.
Yeah.
Is the stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, and I'm very active on my social media about promoting my sobriety and recovering out loud. But again, to show people, like, look at, not like brag, like, oh, look how great my life is. Like, I definitely still struggle, but look at what a sober life could be like. I want people to see that, you know, because there's just always that image that, you know, again, like someone just like drunk on the street or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to make a lot of sober posts and about my own sobriety and about my own recovery. And then I would always get those random messages that were just like, "I'm here if you need me," or "You have me in your heart." I'm like, "That's not what I'm doing here. I'm not trying to like look for sympathy.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to like speak to those who are also trying to get sober or thinking about getting sober, or anything like that." And eventually I stopped because I was like, I don't know what kind of message I'm sending out there.
But now you have this wonderful podcast.
I know. And see, the podcast adds that little comedy aspect. So it has this sheen of comedy over it, where it's not like feel bad for me kind of post, because it made me feel very strange at first, because I was like, am I just crying? And I was. But, but now I have the podcast where I'm like, oh, now at least we can talk about it. I'm getting these guests on, and I'm showing it, I'm showing other people that it's not just crying. It's mostly crying. There's a lot of crying.
Yeah,
Buckle up for some crying. But it's also laughing. It's also getting more connected, finding your fear, and then like defeating your fear, and then finding that there's more fear behind that. And, and just living more authentically, I guess. Like for me, I think that was the issue, was that when I was posting, when I got sober, I got very sensitive to being performative, because much of my life was performative. It was a lot of like, oh, I gotta pretend like I'm sober in this meeting, and like make sure nobody knows that I'm fucked up right now. And then like I would come in and I'd bring in like my acting chops and my comedy chops and my charisma chops, and like pop into a meeting and like make sure everyone's laughing, so they don't see that I'm actually like crying on the inside.
Sure, yeah.
And so then I would, I'd make these posts, and I'm like, man, I don't know if this is as funny as I think it is. And then eventually I stopped caring, I guess. But I'm still very sensitive to like inauthentic kind of things like that. Like anything that's a little too performative or a little too for other people, you know what I mean? So I'm trying to, I even when I do the podcast, like every time I do one, I have to like take a day or two or even a week before I can edit it, because there's a little bit there where I'm like, man, did I sound like a jackass? There's like a cringe effect,
I get that.
And then,
I'm always like thinking that about myself.
Every social interaction, there's like a cringe effect. Like I had Thanksgiving
100%.
with my girlfriend's friends, and I was doing like, the friend scan. Like we just started dating, and I was meeting her friends for the first time, and these were like some of her close friends, and so they were meeting me for the first time. And even that night I was like, man, should I have made that joke? Was that a good joke? I mean, everyone laughed, but like did they laughing because it was weird? And like it's just like I was like constantly in my head about the performance of it, and it's just like it's hard to let go, the cringe effect of sobriety, I guess.
Yeah.
But then that's where self-compassion comes in, right?
Absolutely.
Now we're back on track.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, the way that you speak to yourself really matters. I mean, again, I just think that another thing with, learning about myself through my healing journey is just how much our emotions then dictate our behaviors, and how our mindset dictates, our emotions and our behaviors. So, self-compassion and self-acceptance are really, I think something that everyone should learn how to practice. It's hard to implement at first, because it's like you think, I think we're always told that when we think about ourselves that it's selfish.
Yeah.
Or, that we always have to be thinking about other people, but we don't really learn how to nurture or care for ourselves. And then, if we are feeling stressed or anxious or socially awkward or things like that, all that we've ever learned or has been depicted in media, or we've been kind of taught to believe, is just then you just like drink about it. You just like unwind and go out and have drinks and forget about your problems and things like that, versus actually learning skills of how to manage your stress and your emotional state and things like that.
Contemplate it, let it go, find something to learn from. Yeah.
I think another thing is just learning to sit in the discomfort.
Yeah. We talk a lot about that in this podcast.
And I talk about that a lot. It's like, it's hard to do. It sucks. It's not fun by any means, but that's where the growth happens. And that's where you can learn to be really empowered and proud of yourself, because it does suck.
Yeah.
And it isn't fun to sit in your uncomfortability. But there could also be things that, thoughts that come up that can be really, revealing in a positive way, or, yeah, I think that's just where the shift can happen, is when you're uncomfortable.
Yeah. One thing that I did when I first got sober, I was struggling with that a lot, especially with these like intrusive thoughts, these like angry thoughts towards myself, a lot of self-hatred. And I still do it a lot. And I would, I was able to like recognize after a while that these thoughts weren't my own, that they were sort of these seeds planted in there by some of the people in my past who had hurt me.
Absolutely.
And that was what I was drinking away. Like the drinks were kind of like bringing the part of myself that was that could fight back against them out, and I would get drunk and I would like either diminish into like nothingness, or get like this huge bravado where I could like fight them, or like find that like jokey performance charisma that I can get over them, right? And then as I was going through my first year of sobriety, especially since I was kind of by myself for most of it, I started like delineating each thought. And then when I was having a lot of them, I found myself in this sort of loop. I would say out loud, like, shut the fuck up, and say whoever's name it was, right? So it would like, I had this really shitty boss in my early 20s. I used to run this coffee shop, and he was like super abusive and really shitty. His name was Jody. And I don't mind saying his name on this podcast because he sucks that much. And anyone who's listening to this in Atlanta knows how much he sucks. And I would like literally be like, "Shut the fuck up, Johnny! Like, shut the fuck up. That's not that you're not. It's not even my speech cadence, right?" And then I would start, after I kind of fought them and was able to name them, like in the Never-Ending Story, where you can like name your enemy, right? It made it a little easier. It made me realize like, oh, I'm not mad at myself. I'm like stuck in this loop because someone did that to me. And now I have an enemy, and I can separate myself from that. And then now I can see who I am, which is the little Sebastian, the little kid who's like screaming out the window while it's raining outside, so it's, or Atreyu who's like pulling on his horse. I didn't mean to bring that scene up. I'm sorry, guys. We can have a moment. But it's like, it helps. It helps to like name those thoughts and realize that it's actually not you talking. And that's, to me, that's where I started developing a lot of self-compassion. And then after that, it was like, oh shit, now what can I do? And then I had to start learning how to challenge myself positively, which is still something I struggle with, where it's like, finding the compassion to have the motivation because it's good for me versus doing it because out of spite or something like that. So it's interesting that you bring that up. It's something that it's like, it is one of those things that you're just like, God, can I get a break? Can I just have like one moment where I can just feel okay with like watching another episode of King of the Hill, or whatever is your comfort show.
I know, it's always a constant, but then that's where gratitude comes in.
Yeah.
And then you have to shift your mindset to gratitude. But as annoying as all of these things can be sometimes, I'm also like, I'm setting myself up for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Because life's always going to be, unfortunately, have moments of disappointment or uncomfortability or trauma, or like things happen. Whereas now I'm finally learning the tools and implementing these tools so that in the right now I can help myself, but then, down the road in the future, I can implement these things that I've learned as well.
Yeah, and it builds on itself. That was something I struggled with, because when you're drinking, nothing can be built, because it builds a little and then you drink it all away.
Or it deteriorates.
Yeah, because you've neglected it. You go on a bender or whatever. But then these traits, they start to build, and then suddenly all of that hard work kind of accumulates into something really nice and pretty. And then that's when your brain's like, okay, now you're safe. So now you got to deal with all your trauma. And you're like, well, shit. Got to get back to work, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But I know it's like, it sounds so lame to say, but it really is about the journey. I've learned. And I like will keep saying that to myself sometimes, and I'm like, "Ugh, I hate that that's true."
Yeah.
Because it's just so lame to
Yeah.
me and cringe. But I'm like, it actually is true.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it does sound like something that you see on the wall of like a rehab center.
Yes.
Um,
Or in like a Hallmark card or
Yeah.
something. But
but that's why it's on there, right? That's
Mhm.
why it's on the wall of the rehab center, because it is true, unfortunately.
Mhm.
But journeys are cool. I mean, you know, Lord of the Rings is a journey,
Mhm.
and that's a lot of fun.
Mhm.
And that's that you can always just find whichever journey, whichever kind of analogy you want to put at it. It doesn't have to be, you know, Hallmark. It could be
Mhm.
like Blade was on a journey,
Yup.
and he's a badass. You know,
Absolutely.
he's literally fighting demons,
Mhm.
and so it's just about kind of finding your own vibe, your own way through it,
Mhm.
and your own strength. I think that's where I think a lot of my own self-compassion came from, was trying to find my own personal strength
Mhm.
and what it looks like, instead of just like my strength was how much I could drink, and
Mhm.
and how I could like keep up with everybody,
Mhm.
or like drink
Yeah.
everyone under the table or
Mhm.
whatever, you know.
Yeah, especially like for me being like a woman in, you know, a lot of male dominated spaces, and like I'm the cool girl that can like keep up and like all of that
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah.
Like all of that. But yeah, and community is really important too.
Yeah. That's the hardest thing.
Mm.
I think that's, for me, was the most difficult thing in my sobriety, was finding that community, which is great that now that there's these actual events
Mm-hmm.
coming out. Because I think a lot of, especially when you first get sober, there's a lot of kind of moments where you look around and you're like, who the fuck are these people?
Mm-hmm.
I don't like any of you guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of have to go through a cutting period
Mm-hmm.
where you're just like, you're kind of casting everybody, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, next.
Yeah.
And it's hard because
Mm-hmm.
because for me, I was like, what does a healthy person look like?
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to figure that out through trial and error. And I feel like normal people figure that out early on. And then there's also huge red flags when you don't have a community and you're trying to form a community, and you're trying to make that first like friend, and they're like, but you don't have any friends. Why? And you're like, well, it's kind of a big thing, this and that. And then they're like, well, it kind of weirds me out. And then, you know what I mean? So it's like finding these spaces where it feels like that was one thing I also noticed, is I wasn't alone in that. And that's one thing I've noticed since I've started this podcast. I've had a lot of people coming up to me and saying like, oh, I didn't realize I'm not alone with these thoughts. And so having like Chicago Sober Society or any of these other things, that's such an awesome service that can offer people kind of like, hey, do you want to talk about King of the Hill, or do you want to talk about your biggest trauma? I'm down with either one.
Exactly. And I think too, I give a lot of credit, you know, to people that show up for the events. I would say almost every meetup or event we do, there's at least one new person, at least. And seeing people, because it's hard to put yourself out there in any situation, I think, in general, but also like to put yourself out there like in a sober scenario, I think can be really intimidating. And I love when new people show up, because I think it's like, is this going to be awkward? Are these people going to be lame? Are they going to be weird? Or like, is this going to make me like uncomfortable or like whatever? And then it's like, I see it at first, and it's this like look on their face of like being nervous or intimidated or whatever, which is totally understandable. But then everyone is so welcoming and so cool and nice, and then it's like almost like a sense of relief. Like either this is what I was looking for, or like this was really cool. Like I got to vibe with people. And I think sometimes when people are new, they don't want to like show up and be like, okay, here's my trauma story, here's why I drink, but they can just connect with people in a safe space. And then it's like, okay, you know, maybe I can keep showing up to events, or like maybe I could live a sober lifestyle. I see these people doing it and they seem to be great.
And they're thriving. Yeah. And they're not just like in a basement, like feeling sad or anything like that. Yeah. Again, I don't mean to shit on AA too much. Sorry.
No, I know, but that was exactly my thought process. Like,
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, is there, I mean, what was that like for you? I mean, when you first kind of started hanging out with sober people, did you make the first leap and then a bunch of people kind of signed up or?
yeah. So my very first, I was really nervous about it. So I was, posting about my sobriety online and on my Instagram.
Self-care in the city, right?
And then I just like completely on a whim, like made a post and I was like, I'm starting this community. Basically, like, if you want to join me, cool. Like, I feel like there's a need for this. And it was around December. So I guess Chicago Sober Society is like almost 2 years old now. So it was around December that I made that original post, and then I just like posted that I was gonna host a New Year's Day brunch.
Nice. That's a good time too.
Because I was like, instead of us like being, we think about New Year's Eve, obviously, and everyone thinks about being drunk or hungover or whatever. And I was like, let's celebrate the new year. Celebrating our sobriety or meeting new people. So I just posted like about a brunch. We went to Beatnik and they have a lot of like really great non-alcoholic drinks and people just showed up. I was like, here's the RSVP, show up. I had no idea what to expect. And I think like maybe 10 people showed up.
Whoa, that's a big show. That's kind of a big turnout.
Yeah. And we just sat there and, ate and kind of got to know each other and talk or whatever. And some of those people I still see on social media, and again, not everything is going to be up for everyone. Maybe like my group wasn't for them because I think there were more like AA people in there, which is totally fine. But then there's people that showed up to that very first event that keep continuously showing up and that I consider like really good friends of mine, like genuinely outside of just sobriety. I'm like, that's a very close, genuine friend that I'll probably be friends with for a long time.
That's awesome. So you found a need and you just went for it. That's incredible.
Because I did have support from people with my sobriety, especially people that knew my childhood, but like my friends that were drinking, I was grateful that they were actually super supportive. But at the same time, I was like, but you guys don't get it. Like, I want to find people that get it. Yeah. People that kind of struggle the same way that I do or, are on the same like sobriety vibe, So I was looking for my people and I've found them.
Yeah. I remember when I got sober one time in like 2015 or something, I just had friends who were like, oh, so you can be DD. We can go out and you'll be the DD. And I'm like, that's not how it works, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know what you mean. I know that when I hit like 2 years, one of the reasons I even started this podcast was because I was just like trying to talk about it with anyone. Like I would be at jujitsu and I would roll with somebody. I remember I rolled with this one guy and he had told me right before we rolled, which a roll is like a wrestle, is that he was a therapist. And so we rolled, he totally kicked my ass. And then in the end, I was just like, we only have like 2 minutes before the next roll. And I was just like, anyways, here's my story. And I wanted to talk about it. And I wanted to find someone who got it. And like, I also wanted to find someone who I didn't have to talk about it. Like I didn't have to get into the details. I could just be like, oh, you know how like when you're just sad for no reason? And they're like, yeah, totally. I'm like, yeah, that's what's happening right now. And it's hard to find that, especially when you're dealing with already the kind of sort of the built-in shame that comes with getting sober, because there is that lot of like, oh, I feel like I did terrible things, or I treated myself badly, or I wasted my life and stuff like that. And then you don't want to go up to somebody and be like, this is what sobriety is like. You want to go up to someone who is sober, who's like not trying to do that, and they're like, oh yeah, I know, you don't have to talk about it. I already know. So let's like go and just like look at the river or go skating or bowling or go to medieval times if anybody wants to do that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's really awesome.
Yeah, it's been really surprising how it's like really taken off, and now, um, I used to have like an Instagram group chat. Now I have a Discord, and I have the Facebook group. And what I want to do in 2024 too, because now there's so many different opportunities. I want to kind of try to make an online like calendar of events, so it's all in one place, so that you can always see like this is what's being offered in the sober space in Chicago. And then you can just like see it and be like, okay, I can go to that, or like that sounds really cool, I'll go to that, or something like that.
Oh, that's cool. I've seen that, there's a Instagram account called Chicago Open Mics for all the like comedy stuff.
Okay.
And they have that. They have like a Google Doc that's locked.
Okay.
And it'll show all of the open mics and all the bars and like when to show up and how to sign up and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I want to do something like that, I think.
I think that would be really helpful, especially now that I think more and more people are getting sober or even just like not wanting to be in a drunk, crazy space. I mean, I feel like just in general, culture in Chicago is a little less drunk than it was. Maybe it's because I don't go to Old Town as much anymore or Logan Square, but I feel like even like Andersonville like used to get kind of sloppy on Saturdays and Sundays, and now it just feels like it's a little bit chiller, a little bit calmer. I don't know if that's because weed's legal here or not or something. It probably has something to do with it.
I think that, but also they're saying now, I see so many publications about how Gen Z just doesn't drink like how former like older generations do. And I have two younger Gen Z sisters, and they're just like not really into it. They'll still go out sometimes, they'll still get a little bit drunk, but it's very different from like when I was younger, when I was their age.
Yeah, I have some younger kids at work that are like that, and I'm just like, man, wish I had that. That's crazy.
I actually get a lot, and it's so surprising to me, and I love it. I will get a lot of people, because I see when people join my Facebook group, and there's a lot of young people, like 25 or younger. And I'm like, wow, like I didn't get sober till I was 30. And just even thinking about sobriety at like 23, would have never crossed my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely was thinking about it, but mainly because I was on that track. Like I say this a lot, but when I got sober, it was like the prophecy had been written. I knew that this was something that needed to happen, but I wasn't going to do it. Yeah, and there was definitely no support in my peer group to do it. I didn't know anyone who didn't drink. Just like, oh, I don't really drink that much. Usually, because I'm from Atlanta and like in the South, like I was born in Texas and moved to Atlanta. Usually, if they just didn't drink that much, it's because they were part of a youth group. Okay, which was not my vibe. So it was kind of like
straight edge
or straight edge, which was also not my vibe. Yeah. I mean, I would go to hardcore shows, but I was usually the drunk one there, and they were like the really angry guys. But yeah, it was like, now it's just like, I don't really do it, and it's just like, oh, okay, that's cool. Do you want to talk about it? I'm like, there's nothing to talk about. I just don't drink. And I'm like, oh, well, I have a podcast, and it's just like, it's great. It's this cultural shift that's coming, this relationship with alcohol that's coming. I mean, I think I saw an article recently that like, I mean, when you have like Anheuser-Busch making non-alcoholic beers and like Bud Light Zero, that's crazy. Yeah. That shows a whole new market is developing.
1000%. But also it's cool and fun, because when you go to Cubs games at Wrigley, they sell Bud Zero. So I can like still have the like going to a baseball game experience. Yeah. And, they also have, I was at a Hawks game, like a preseason game a couple weeks ago. They had Bud Zero there. So
that's wild.
And now I saw, because like I just like look at all these articles and I get so excited about it. It actually started at Lambeau Field, where the Packers play, but they're starting to, in some different NFL stadiums, they have the sober section. And it's like for people that just like don't want to drink, and then you can like sit there, because like obviously at sporting events can be very, heavy drinking culture, so you can like sit in the sober section and just like drink your non-alcoholic drinks and like not be triggered by like all the drunk people. Like, isn't that so cool? Like
That's
this world we live in now.
That's
like,
great. I love that it's also at Lamp. Like I always feel like the Packers are the drunkest
Exactly.
fans. That's insane. That's I'd never even heard of that.
Yeah. It just like warms my heart when I see things like that. And then I always share it because I'm like, look, no, see, there's all these like cool like ways that like sobriety is just either moving in a positive direction or like you can still have these experiences.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like, like back in the day when you had like smoking and non-smoking sections. I feel like that might be like, then now it's just all non-smoking, right? It kind of feels like that's going to be the next window, right? It's going to start moving over. And I think it's just because we've all seen it. I think there's a big, I think the pandemic really pushed public health and like acknowledgement of public health issues. I think a lot of people, like Tom has told me this, like about how he saw just a lot of shitty stuff. Or like the last podcast we had with Jason, he was saying that the reason Pauly Shore doesn't drink is because his mom used to own the Comedy Store and he just saw too many terrible things. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at as a culture. Like we've lost so many people to drugs and alcohol, so many great artists that now culturally we're like, man, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe that like buzz isn't worth it. Maybe getting like shithouse hammered and in the football stadium and like embarrassing yourself for no reason and like watching like grandma get completely like sloshed isn't worth it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's so crazy that we all like just thought it was like so normal and fine.
Yeah. And
it's like a spiritual awakening everyone's
absolutely
happening.
And I feel like what's even greater is that the market is responding. They could easily be like, oh, whatever, we have duels, but instead they saw like it was hitting their sales. No one was buying as much. They were talking about there's all these new breweries popping up, and so it's just kind of like the IPA fad of like 2010, where it's like, oh, we're not drinking Bud Lights anymore, they're drinking like fancier stuff. And so then Bud Light had to start making fancier stuff.
Exactly.
And it's just like that's what I love to see is like corporations only listen to the bottom line, and the bottom line is getting to a point where like they have to react to this big sobriety push. They have to like keep going, and I hope it keeps going. I figure it will in some way. I don't think like culturally we're all gonna relapse, maybe, but it happens every now and again. It's expected. It's part of the journey. But I just love that there's going to be more support, because I just know when I first got sober in 2012, there was no support, especially in Atlanta. And the support that was there was not fun. And the things that I had to drink to get through was not fun. And I would just stay in my apartment and then I would just go to the gym. And then I also had like a hard time connecting with other people because they were all, drunk punk rockers in the restaurant industry. And then like I would be sitting there, working in the kitchen while everyone else was sloshed on Tecates. And
then you're like resentful.
Yeah, and then they're also resentful because I can't like vibe with them, and they think that I'm some sort of crunchy hippie, which I am. But like, I don't want that. They should know that. I want to tell them that. I don't want them to just assume it.
Yeah.
And it's like now that it's like they're just like, oh, I don't really do it that much. Like that happened over Thanksgiving. I had the first Thanksgiving where there was alcohol there. Everyone had like one or two, maybe. There was like a bottle of wine. We probably through 5 people got through a bottle of wine, and there were several people there who were just like, oh yeah, I'm not really drinking that much anymore. And it wasn't like I'm sober and they're like, oh, let's talk about it. It was just like, this is what I'm doing now. And everyone was just like accepting it. And it wasn't like, if I had done that 10 years ago, it would have been like a real hush hush kind of thing, and people would have been like, oh, it's such a problem, or like, what did he do? I remember when I got that question a lot, like, oh, what happened? Like they want to hear like my rock bottom story, like it's going to be some sort of funny thing that happened. And no, just people are just not drinking anymore. They just decided that for different reasons, like you were saying, like connect with their children or whatever. And it's just this like beautiful movement. And I think on top of that, I've been going to some comedy shows, and one really popular thing when I was doing comedy was to hear your drunk story. Like, oh, I was so fucking drunk. I did this crazy thing. And then my friend, you know what I mean? And then that everyone would be like cracking up and stuff like that. That's not happening either. And it's like we're getting into more of like, I don't want to say wholesome, but it feels wholesome. I'm getting into like,
and you know what? I think we need that sometimes.
I do too. Yeah, like we all just want like a big cultural hug.
Right? Yeah, we definitely need it. Definitely need it. I saw something where they're actually comparing it to, you know, drinking culture with, you know, like back in the day when everyone would just like smoke cigarettes indoors everywhere and like whatever. And then we're like, oh wait, that's like not good. Like, and people just aren't smoking like they used to. Like comparing that with drinking, like just in 30 years, like people just like aren't really going to be drinking anymore.
I love that. Who
knows if that's true? I think it'll always be prevalent, but I think that the shift has already happened, and I think that there's really no going back.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely love that. I mean, the whole public health aspect of smoking is one of the things that got me into advertising, because it's like advertising used to be like you would see people smoking and drinking, like, you know, watch a movie in the 50s. That's all they're doing. Like, that's why I can't watch Mad Men, because I would get triggered like crazy. Yeah. And I remember when I was drinking, I watched like the first episode and I didn't make it because I was like trying to keep up with them for some reason. And like, but over the course of even my own lifetime, I saw like, now when I saw like everyone's smoking, and now when I meet someone smoking, like, why are you doing that? It's weird. Like, you know, that's bad, right? Yeah. It's like, you know, it's like they might as well be eating like radioactive material or something like that. When it used to be such a normal thing. Yeah. And now it's like, if you see someone completely drunk, or like the kind of guy who's like drinking constantly, you know, swollen liver or anything, like kind of vibe, or like just real like heavy drinker, you're kind of like, you okay? Like, why are you doing that? Yeah. And it's not like, oh, he's just a party guy. He's just cool, you know? And it's just, that cultural shift is just incredible. Yeah. I love it. And now we have Chicago Sober Society.
Yeah. Well, I hope I see you at an event soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely going to check out that one that you talked about on the 15th. The skating? Ice skating? Yeah. I don't know how to ice skate. I'm from the South.
Well, put yourself out there and learn something new.
I know how to rollerblade. Is it similar?
Not really.
Really?
I mean, kind of, not really. It's just, I think once you get the hang of it, it's a little bit easier, like gliding the movements. But even like when I first start, I always have to hold on to the side a little bit, and then you get your footing, and then you just kind of go.
That's the one. That's not the ribbon one, is it? Oh, you're going to the ribbon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's fun, and it's like weaves around a little bit, and you can see the whole skyline too.
Chicago has a beautiful skyline. Okay, I think I might go to that one.
Yeah, or you can just meet us at the Nutella Cafe afterwards if you want.
No, I gotta ice skate. It's like on my bucket list. I think I can do it. I have impeccable balance.
There you go.
But I'm like ice sensitive. I'm just like when I first moved here, I didn't know how to walk on the snow. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even have a heavy jacket. I just wore all of my jackets at the same time, so I kind of looked like the kid from Christmas Story. And then I didn't have any boots, so I was just kind of like shuffling everywhere I went. Yep. And everyone told me to walk like a penguin, and I kept rolling on my belly, but it didn't seem to get me anywhere. And then thanks for laughing at that. That was an okay joke. And then eventually, I got my jacket, I got my boots, but it was like $1,000 buy-in. And I'm still very like, anytime winter hits, I'm still like, oh, here it comes. I don't know what to do. Yeah. I'm scared. But I'm also still very fascinated by snow. I've never built a snowman either.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I grew up in Northwest Indiana, so I've just always been exposed to snow in the seasons. So I guess it's just something I've always.
So you've built like plenty of snowmen. You should have a snowman building contest.
I don't know about that, but
I mean, it is fun. We haven't really gotten a whole lot of snow the last couple years. You need a lot of snow.
Yeah, it's because the planet is dying. But yeah, that's what people can be like. Don't worry, Chicago's not that cold because the planet is dying. I'm like, well, I guess it's like
great. That's not good either.
Meet in the middle there. I guess we can end on the planet dying. It's
a terrible place to end, but okay.
Great. I'm here with Hannah. I don't know what's Burke, right? I'm here with Hannah Burke of Chicago Sober Society, and we were talking about self-compassion. And hope you guys had fun. I'm here with Mateo. This is my roommate Mateo, and tune in next week. Tom will be here. We'll have Max Fine, and keep on keeping on and take care of you guys, and check out Chicago Sober Society's events.